Since the announcement of Fire Emblem for Nintendo Switch close to 2 years ago, we have received only one trailer for what is now called Fire Emblem Three Houses. Today I want to discuss some of the community's thoughts and concerns surrounding the release date of FE Switch in an attempt to diffuse some of the concerns that I've seen online. The first of these major concerns is surrounding the hype cycle, or I guess the lack of a hype cycle surrounding Fire Emblem Three Houses. You know, when a game is soon to be released, gameplay footage and story trailers are used to generate interest for that game, and many are asking where these trailers are for Three Houses. While it may be customary for many companies to show off their games years in advance of release, Nintendo, especially in recent years, has kept future releases pretty close to the chest. More often than not, they don't show trailers for any game that isn't being released within a year, and they don't share much more until a month or two before release. Now, you could look to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild or even Super Smash Bros. To contradict this point, but I believe these games are the exception and not necessarily the rule for other games that Nintendo puts out. Another way to look at this is that Nintendo really just didn't want to take away anything from Super Smash Bros. And Pokemon, their two biggest games of 2018, like by far. So it makes sense that they wouldn't want to draw any attention away from their two biggest titles of the year, so that those sold well. And now that that holiday season is over, they're transitioning into 2019, I think it's totally reasonable to think that we're going to start focusing on titles for this year, such as Yoshi's Crafted World, maybe even Metroid Prime 4, Animal Crossing, and of course, Fire Emblem Three Houses. Because of a lack of a hype cycle, many fans are worried that Three Houses is going to be delayed. And honestly, even with this lack of information we've had, I don't think that's a concern yet. I mean, if we don't hear anything by the end of January, early February, maybe even, I would even push it as far as to say if we don't hear anything by the end of February, we might be seeing it in summer. But that is still pushing it. If we hear something even by March, it's totally reasonable to think that Three Houses can come out by May, maybe even early June, which is technically still a spring release. So I do think it's very likely that the game will still come out in spring, and we just need to take Nintendo's word for it at this point. So there's not really much we can debate about at this point because of the lack of information. But again, I don't think the lack of information is really a problem yet. But I would like to give you a guess as to what I think is going to happen. This is just a prediction, of course. So there's been a lot of rumored talk about a Nintendo Direct happening in January, and I think this is mainly just because there was a Nintendo Direct in January last year. There are actually two January Directs last year for the Nindies Direct and the just Nintendo Direct. And I think it's pretty reasonable to believe that we will get at least one Direct towards the end of January. And I think in that Direct we'll get a lot of indie talk, some third-party conversation as well. But we'll also hear about Yoshi's Crafted World, definitely Three Houses, Fire Emblem Three Houses at that time, and maybe even Metroid or Animal Crossing at the end of the Direct, among a bunch of third-party and indie games along with that stuff, like I said. And this Fire Emblem trailer will give us like a definitive date for release in late March, and I'm going to say March 22nd, which is a Friday. It falls in line with other major releases they've had in the past, namely Breath of the Wild and the Nintendo Switch itself. And I think other Fire Emblem trailers will follow every 2 or 3 weeks after this initial trailer that gives us the release date, just giving us the general story and some gameplay changes and elements that we haven't seen that are going to be introduced. I think it's specifically they'll talk about formations and stuff like that. But if we don't get a definitive release date by mid-February, then I think it's safe to assume that Three Houses will be pushed back to later spring, which isn't technically a delay, but I do think we maybe get an April, early May release. But that's just a gut feeling I have, and I think it really is going to come out earlier than that. I really do think it's going to come out in March, but it's tough to say at this point. So for a quick recap, it's okay that Nintendo has yet to reveal more information about Fire Emblem Three Houses. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be delayed or that game is going to be bad for any reason. We will probably hear something about it in the next month or two, and the game will be released another couple months after that. So again, please don't be worried. I think Fire Emblem Three Houses is going to be a great game. I think it's going to come out in spring 2019 as announced, and we just need to stop worrying a little bit and have a little faith in our friends over at Nintendo. But let me know in the comments when you think we will first find out the release date for Fire Emblem Three Houses. And what will that release date be? Again, I think we're going to hear about it within a month or two, and I think it's going to be late March. But again, let me know.